We are officially live. Thank you so much, Brian, for being our very first guest.
Thank you for having me.
John, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'm really stoked to get into everything with Brian. I think we got a great slate of questions. I think our viewers and listeners are really going to enjoy his journey, just kind of get some of those inside scoops on how to start, where to start, and kind of what an actual founder's journey looks like from the real, right? I think we constantly are hearing all the big flashy, mega success unicorns out there, but, most startup founders aren't looking to maybe necessarily go down that route. So really loving understanding a little bit about Brian's background already and, really enjoying and kind of looking forward to getting into the weeds with him a little bit.
All right, so let's get started. Brian, we want to know, I know I already know a lot about you, but we want to know more about you, your background, like what really motivated you to be in tech?
Yeah, I'll give you guys the full backstory because I think I have a fairly unique adventure through tech, and it starts all the way back in middle school. Yeah, so I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I'm very fortunate. My dad actually was an engineer, and so I was around technology for most of my life. I didn't really know it as a kid. I just like playing video games. But when I was in seventh grade, my dad was like, "Hey, there's this summer kind of like engineering camp. It's called DAPSEP, or Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program." And it was a 2-week summer camp. And I was like, he was like, "Do you want to do this?" I was like, "Sure, it sounds a really cool summer thing." And so you got to do one class in the morning and one class in the afternoon. And my class in the morning was CAD. So I actually did designing like house designs and stuff like that. And I thought that was super cool. My afternoon class was coding. So I learned to write code in QBasic in this seventh grade summer camp, and it blew my mind how cool it was. My favorite thing was over the course of the class, basically, they taught us how to draw. You would put like a XY point in a line, and you could draw through it. And I learned loops, and so I made a loop that would redraw a photo, and effectively it was like a slow-mo animation thing where I had to draw every scene, and it was like really spaghetti code, and it was really bad, but it was the coolest thing ever as a seventh grader. And ever since then, I've just been enthralled with anything and everything I could get my hands on technology wise. Fast forward, went to University of Michigan for college, studied computer science there. Graduated, worked in Fortune 500, big company for a couple years, and hated it. To be blunt, they didn't do anything wrong. It was just a big, slow company. It wasn't really fast for innovation. And so I decided to, on the side, just start dabbling in startup ideas. But you hear about Silicon Valley, you hear about all the startup stuff, all these fundraising, space. But I'm in Detroit, Michigan, and the startup scene's very different there. Everything's willy nilly California. But this is where the story gets super crazy for me, at least. So I'm building this startup idea. The first startup idea I had was a Jira competitor. I then later learned that was a terrible idea because there was about 10,000 of them out there. And we can dive into that if you're curious further. So I started building this company. Really had no idea what I was doing, but we were just some tech people. And I entered this local pitch competition that was coming around. I was like, "Oh, this sounds cool. I'll go pitch my startup idea. This just sounds fun." I didn't think much of it. I ended up winning first place out of 50 ideas that were pitched there. And the
That's
grand
amazing.
prize was to join their startup accelerator in San Francisco, California. And so at 23 years old, I quit my job, sold everything I owned, and bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco, having never been to California in my life. And so, yeah, I just went for it. Terrifying. I had I don't know, maybe $20,000 in my bank account. That was my life savings. And I just came here and I lived in my friend's couch for a month and then joined the accelerator. Obviously that then just, kind of going, that first company didn't work out, but I kind of kept on the startup journey, and then it'll dive into my Bootstrap founder story from there. But it was a wild adventure getting into tech, and I've loved every minute of it. So yeah, rather than keep going on that, yeah, I'll see if you has any other questions along that way, or we can I can just kind of keep going.
I love it. Yeah, I love all of it. I love just your early jump from someone who's been in STEM from similar age. I never caught the CS bug, but was adamant about always being close to those who were, right? I went into mechanical engineering as kind of like a direct correlation in the same sense. So very curious to hear a little bit more down the line about learning to code versus working with those who do know how to code, and kind of again, this path as a journey together to build out something that does work really well, and kind of understanding kind of your lessons learned and things like that between kind of your first startup versus what you did kind of in your second iteration.
Yeah,
So I have a question for you, Brian.
please.
So you mentioned being in this seventh grade summer camp and making your own first product to buying a one-way ticket to the Valley, basically. What was your first impression being in San Francisco and kind of being in really that incubator phase and like building? How did you think your background kind of shaped the way you approach building? And what was your first like thought?
Yeah, honestly, it was a difficult transition for me. Like, and mostly in the sense of, I mean, I didn't know what San Francisco was like, and it was very different from what I was expecting. We were living in a very cramped, very small place, and I'd come from a nice 2-bedroom apartment in Michigan that was half the cost of my closet of a room in San Francisco. So that was like one a bit of like an adjustment, especially once the first startup wasn't working out, and I'm here in this place. I'm like, why did I do this? This is a horrible idea. But I kind of kept going. You know, I even as a young, I kind of one of the stories I skipped on earlier, like in high school, I started a web design business because I knew how to code and I could build websites. So I made money. And so I was just like, keep building, keep figuring it out. Like something has to hit eventually. And so this actually can tie into my next story. I was 2 weeks away from deciding to go back to Michigan at one point. I had run out of money. The first startup idea wasn't working out. I wanted to pivot, but I literally had like $400 left in my bank account at this point. And so I was living on my friend's couch in Oakland, and I entered another hackathon. I'm really good at this pitching thing, I've learned. And so this was the launch hackathon back in 2013. The goal of the hackathon was Jason Calacanis was looking to find startups to fund out of his thing. And so I wrote an article. I can actually send you guys on this later about how I like approach hackathons, and it's not as relevant now. There's not as many. But basically, I kind of came with the idea. It was like I wrote my business pitch first, and then I built a demo around that business pitch. And through like 3 rounds of pitching, I think there might have been like 1,000 participants. I won first place and got like $35,000 in investment from Jason Calacanis. I tried my startup pivot idea.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a good,
So
that's a
like
good
I
name
was
to have.
literally 2 weeks away. Unfortunately, like the pivot, I did my best, but like my co-founder who I was working with, he kind of had to go back and get a job. So 35,000 was only enough to support me. And you blow through that quickly in San Francisco. That's like 3 months rent out here. Not literally, but pretty close to it. And so, yeah, you just kind of keep finding a way to keep going. But when that startup was starting to run down, that's when I built my first bootstrap business out of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very curious. Tell us about your Bootstrap founder story.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and there's a co-founder involved, and I'll get to that in a second. So basically, that first startup I won the investment. I worked on that for another 6 months to 7 months, and the money ran out. And so, like I did a little consulting in between that for a couple months just to like have some money. But as the first startup was failing, it was actually, and I'll be unblunt here, was the co-founder idea for the Bootstrap business. And so my co-founder and I were roommates at this 60-person hacker house on 6th Street in San Francisco. It was literally like a giant old converted church. Literally the bottom floor used to be a church, and upstairs was where like the people live. And it was converted into this like hacker dorm where 60 of us, 30 rooms and bunk beds stayed there. And one of my roommates he appreciated my like I just got them and built things, and he really liked that about me, or one of the 60 people. And so he was a kind of growth hacker consultant at the time. You know, he would get hired by apps or companies to kind of come in and help figure this, like, kind of hacky growth strategy early on. And he actually noticed the problem of the business ended up being called link texting that we built. But basically, a lot of companies would get desktop traffic. This is, 2014, and they would need to convert this desktop traffic to mobile app downloads. Mm-hmm. And so I had a couple companies he worked with. They had implemented this text to download widget on their website, but they had to like spin up a server and do Twilio and all this other stuff. And it was a really big overhead. So he was like, hey, I think we have an opportunity to build a SaaS service here. And I told him, no, I'm like focused on my other startup idea. I'm not going to do this with you. And for like 4 or 5 months straight, he kept pestering me. So he's a technical person, but he's like, hey, I really think this is something here. And he kept pestering me for like 4 or 5 months. And so around month 4 or 5 was when my first startup completely ran out of money. And so I was like, you know what? I'll give this a go with you. Like, I actually believe there's something there. Like, I even told him when I first told him no. I was like, hey, I'm not saying no because it's a bad idea. I've raised investment for a startup, and it would be like not a good look ethically for me to like jump ship to work on something else when I've picked somebody else's money to do something. But when that fully shut down, I was like, okay, there's a there. I believe you. And so This is where you guys talk about this, and having a good back and forth between us was really important, like the entire time through the whole journey. So, him really pestering me to build this. And then when I finally said yes, he loves telling the story too. But I disappeared on a Friday night and I came back on Sunday evening and I was like, hey, I built it. Our MVP's ready. Like I just sat down and built the most minimal MVP I could. It was
You
was
love
just
to hear that as a non-technical person, I'll tell you that.
You're like,
That's
wait, he
lightning.
built the product?
Yeah.
Light bulb moment, right? Or at
Yes.
least how that there's a really great connection there, right? That you
Totally.
both kind of feed off of one another and gives you that ability to burn the candle at both ends or burn the midnight oil, you name it. And it reinvigorates you about this idea that you guys are building together.
Absolutely. And so it was really cool. So the product I built is use templates where you can. Nowadays, you can use AI code generators to probably build this thing way faster than I could. But basically, it would generate a little JavaScript HTML snippet that's, a marketer could drop on their website. And it would generate this text to download form that user would type in their phone number. It would hit our backend. It would hit the Twilio API and send that user a text message they'd write in, when they create it in our dashboard, they'd write, here's the text that the person's going to receive. It was a link to download that application. And so built a super hacky version of this in 3 days, and we launched it. And again, this is where I kind of go back and forth, like him kind of being a business founder, me being a technical. But when we launched it, it took us about 2 weeks, and we weren't getting any paid signups. And he wanted to flip the whole product to be free to kind of get it. And I was like, no. I've learned this lesson before. We're not giving away a free product. We're making sure people are going to pay for this. And by waiting another week, we started to get our first 3 to 4 SaaS paying customers. And it was really cheap. Our billing model is basically like a SaaS fee, so like $20 a month to use the platform. And then it was like a penny per text message or something like that. And we got some initial users. And that was like a really exciting moment. It's like, hey, we're real entrepreneurs. We built this thing in 3 days after being, pestered for 5 months. And then we have paying customers now. So yeah, super excited about that.
I love that. I just real quick, I'm curious, we talk about within the SaaS space, product space, what have you, about this aha moment, right? So what was, I guess, that aha moment for the two of you, building this thing and then kind of finding your first users that it clicked with? Just give us a little bit of an insight on kind of what led you to that moment, whether it be product market fit or that, initial aha.
Yeah, I learned in my first 2 startups where it's like, it's really hard to get people to pay for something. It doesn't even matter if it's $5 a month. That $5 a month is surprisingly hard to get from somebody. And so the aha moment of, not just one, but I was 3, 4, 5 customers in the first week that we finally got our first paid, we got 5 in that same week. That was a big aha moment of crossing just that first threshold. One of the big things I take when I do these things and people hear about this is people always say you want to get tens of thousands or 100,000 or customers, get your first 5. Just don't worry about anything till you have 5 paying customers. 10 doesn't matter. 20 doesn't matter. Get your first 5, even 1 if you want to be extra about it. But it really doesn't matter thinking about bigger until your first 5 paying customers are there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's this inherent trust barrier, right? Of finding those people who are willing to be first in line to test this thing out and give us that feedback or provide us with that insight to get us to the place and where we're then kind of built that trust and built that product that resonates. So truly love to hear that. I guess quickly spinning off of that, what was one of the first things that you thought about leveraging the experience that you had from the prior startups as you went into this new venture?
Yeah, it really went back to definitely the build fast. But when my co-founder was like, we're not getting the people to show up and pay for it, maybe make this free, I was like, no, we have to get revenue.
Yeah.
Revenue,
Yeah.
Cash is king. I am not giving up that barrier at all. That is one thing I've learned most. It's if we're not getting paid for this, then we're not doing it.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah,
to take a quick detour, how did you find, and I'm sure a lot of people who would be listening to this is probably one of arguably the hardest things to do early on, right? Is find someone to use your product, but more so find someone who's willing to pay for it. So what was your strategy in particular with this startup to hack your way, not to, pun intended with all the hackathons that you've done, but, hack your way into finding your first users?
Yeah. So my co-founder kind of did the more growth hacky stuff. So he was big on posting on Reddit and finding other writing Medium articles and things like that. I took the opposite approach. I was like, I'm just going to find apps on the App Store and email their website. And I just went straight cold emailing. I was like, hey, like we crafted a pitch, so just kept emailing app after app after app. And then that's what really it was a mix. We actually got in the same week we got our first customer, we got a couple from my emailing outreach and a couple that found some of his more medium articles. Um, one of the things people say this, don't sell a product, like sell it, give advice, and then they're going to buy afterwards. So he would write articles of like, here are top 5 marketing tips to grow your app, and the 5th one is buy our link texting product to get more downloads. But the first 4 were legitimately like actually useful marketing techniques that he'd actually been using. But yeah, to get a little self promo in there is never a bad thing.
I think that's so invaluable for especially someone who's starting, whether it's the VC route or bootstrapping, right? This notion that it's not just cold emailing that's going to get you, and it's a numbers game, right? It's really, you kind of have to, just like you're hacking together your MVP, is you have to hack together those first few users, and you kind of learn to sell, kind of jumping into the deep end and learn to swim, in that same sense. So, really appreciate you kind of sharing your perspective and kind of like how you guys approach that as well.
Totally. And one thing I like to share there, it's like, and I still deal with this, although I'm way better now. It's like as an engineer, being a cold call salesperson was so unnatural for me. Although I will say I got really lucky, and this is really funny, but one of my first jobs was selling Cutco knives. If anybody's ever heard of that, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
I did door-to-door knife sales when I was 20 years old. Relatively door-to-door, but phone calling. And so at least I had some level of comfort of like, I'm going to reach out to a stranger and ask him to buy something from me. But that is still a tricky bear as engineers. It doesn't always come naturally right away, but everything can be a skill that can be learned, in my opinion.
So, when you were doing the cold email outreach, like, do you remember what was like the response rate? Because when I think about cold email, it's like you really got to get that volume in because majority of people aren't going to respond. Do you remember if there was, either an inflection point that people started actually responding to your messages, or if it was like, 2 of the 5 first customers?
Yeah, I will actually say we got lucky and had a decently high response rate. A lot of it was just like people were busy and wouldn't reply right away. And this is not common in my experience with most of the startups I've tried or seen, but some of them, the ones that work really well, do get this, where it's like people were already building and using the solution we have. There was no automated way to do link texting, period, before we built this software. So I don't know if this is, we would basically use examples of like, we could say non-customers of ours have this feature. We're like, hey, Uber has the text to download feature on their website. We didn't give that one to them, but that's something Uber does. You should be doing this too. Use our thing to get this done fast. And we had a very surprisingly high hit rate early on. Again, being fairly cheap, we were like $10, $20 a month. People will be willing to try it, and then they paid per usage fee. So we had a pretty decently high hit rate early on. We just more struggled with like finding the contact info for people early on, actually. That has not been common with most of my startup experiences. The sales game has been a lot harder, but this time it actually was very much clearly automating something or making something easier to happen that already existed was like a huge win, and like a little angle in the market that was easy to win. And definitely one of the big things I made was like, I really focused on making our onboarding super easy. It's like you clicked, you signed up, and then it's like typing your text, here's your snippet, put it on your website. People were onboarded in under 5 minutes live on their website. And so that
That's amazing.
was an aha moment for the customer, was kind
Yeah.
of like a big win.
From a product person who co-founded a onboarding tool specifically for other SaaS startups, you're speaking my language. I'll tell
Yeah.
you that. I am a firm believer in the faster you can prove that time to value and take away that barrier for onboarding. It's just it's such a game changer. So
Absolutely.
it sounds like that resonated on your all's end as well. Do you feel like, I guess thinking about selling as well, when it came down to like defining your ICP, the subset of users that you could kind of initially go after for an MVP, which I think a lot of early stage first time founders even don't maybe necessarily think about to so were you able to leverage a lot of that prior experience going into this next kind of venture? Did your partner kind of bring in some of his business knowledge? How well did playing into your ICP help you kind of again target those initial users and get that better kind of conversion rate?
Yeah, so I'll actually say the initial users was totally a spray and pray. Like we just emailed every app we could find. But what we eventually did do is, and there's kind of 2 parts to this. Was one, we did price experimentation on the way we obviously wanted to start making more money from this product. And so we're like, hey, if we charge $50 a month or $200 a month, what's kind of the ceiling that we're going to run into? And what we did there was we effectively found an ICP where we would just I kind of follow TechCrunch or Crunchbase, like what apps raised the seed round.
Mhm.
Immediately email them with here's the $500 a month package. So like that was a very key. It's like look for who has the money to spend on growing their business, and it was recently funded startups that have a mobile app.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of those in 2015, 2014 when we launched this for sure.
Yeah.
And so yeah, really, really tapping into that. We actually still continue the spray and pray method. It was actually, and I can dive into some of the things we did around that. But definitely the high touch outreach was any kind of startup that like we saw raise funding at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think one of the, if you're thinking about a formula for success early on, you not necessarily become like an IPO or a big exit, right? But more so like thinking about what is your next milestone for the business, understanding that your ICP doesn't need to necessarily, and I guess for those who aren't familiar with that acronym, ideal customer profile is kind of your early kind of customer focus on who you feel very confident is going to be attracted to what you're providing from the software service, right? So making sure that you have some level of ideas to what you want to go after to prove that concept, to prove whether or not you've hit the mark or missed the mark is important. But to what Brian is saying, I think there's a lot of things that resonate with not having to be so specific that you're kind of selling yourself out of a potential bigger pond that you could play in as well. So spray and pray method, I think so many founders have leveraged and used over the years successfully.
Totally. And even just to kind of take the conversation there, I think one of the things you'll find really interesting that we did was, again, this is where I took my combination of business and technical person mindset together. And I effectively built, we actually named and sold this product separately, even though it was an internal tool for us. We called it Grow Amp. It was Grow and Amplify, just stuck together because we got the domain name. But I built a tool that was able to scrape all of the new releases on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, and then I would look for their support website URL, and then I would go crawl that support website for an email address, and I would dump myself a daily spreadsheet of all the new apps that launched every day in a potential contact email. And then we automated the reach out to every single app that launched every day.
I love that. You
Yeah.
built your own, basically your own agent, like what someone
Yes.
can do right now.
Well before agents were a thing, we built our own kind of agent with crawl bots and stuff like that. And then we reached out to all of those, and then what would to make more revenue, but we started selling that list of apps with contact info to other people for like $500 a month, and we were just like, you're going to get a daily email with this, subscribe as long as you want. And so yeah, that was another really cool, like, unexpected entrepreneurial win, or it's like, why do we need to keep this to ourselves? I'm sure somebody else will pay us for this, and yeah, get more value, or you at least expect it.
Yeah, I mean, there's something so to the notion of solving problems or those that exist purely to us, right? And so I think you see a lot of the big VCs, Jason Calacanis, I'm sure, has mentioned something similar where it's much easier for me as a VC to invest in something that is directly tied to the problem that you're facing currently because you're intimately involved with what solution would make the most sense. So I think there's just, so much to that, which, it seems like you were able to tap into. And I think if we're talking about of another side story to that particular example is like you think about Slack, the tool that they built for themselves internally that ended up being the product that we all know and arguably love today.
Absolutely.
If you're thinking back throughout this Bootstrap founder story at the height of your business, what was the monthly recurring revenue that your business was bringing in?
I think it was just under 20 grand a month, which was really good for two 25-year-old dudes in San Francisco. And especially, like, I think the biggest key, it's like 20 grand per month, and we were working on it 30 minutes a week
Wow.
because we had automated that entire sales outreach thing. And I basically, like, 30 minutes a week for me was just processing like cancellations. Like, I don't know if I regret this, but we did the whole, like, you can't cancel on your own, email us to cancel, and we would try and save you type of thing. And people definitely got yelled at us like, I need to cancel now. You need to refund me. And definitely dealt with some angry customers because of that. That was mostly my 30 minutes a week, was just dealing with some of those corner case cancellations and things like that. And so just to have 20 grand a month showing up all the time was really awesome.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Does your team outsource anything, or was it literally just you and your co-founder?
Yeah, so we did do a tiny little bit of outsourcing just around that outreach. So basically, we learned that automating emails to all of those people wasn't optimal, and so we found somebody overseas who just did the emails to those companies for us and would do the first reply and then CC us if there's any like more kind of advanced negotiation on pricing that we had to do. Uh, some of those results in some very interesting, kind of another aside, but like non-expected revenue streams. So I remember MTV had reached out to us at some point to use our tool for a completely non-standard use case. They're like, we're launching some event and we just want a way to collect phone numbers and then send a blast when the event happens. And so they paid us like $5,000 one time to just do this thing for them. And they just put the link texting on their website. They like it sent the email automatically, like you've been subscribed to our event. And then on the day, we just we took all the numbers that had ever texted in and just did a one-time blast to all those numbers again. And yeah, so like just interesting ways that we were just able to use text message as a marketing thing because we built this tool, and kind of the brand name link texting had actually kind of become like, I don't know, huge, but like more known in like the space at the time. Even to the point that we literally had copycats who were trying to do like textlinking.com. I don't think that's an exact one, but there was at least 2 or 3 copycats that were trying to like steal our thunder. I was like, oh, we've made it. We have imitators and imposters.
That is funny how you realize the minute you have your first copycat competitor that you see come into play. Even worse, when you sometimes lose a customer to
Yeah.
that particular person, you're like, all right, maybe I've made it. The haters are out
Exactly.
there, but for a good reason, right?
Exactly.
I'm so curious because I think I've struggled with this in a few different startups before, in particular with this partnership situation. How do you know when it's the right move to turn that into another revenue stream?
At the time, we were just like, if you'll pay us, we'll do it. It was kind of our logic at the time. Like, we didn't really have a barrier of like turning into revenue or not. We would throw out a larger, like a we would have to say yes number that we were like, we would say we charge them like, we'll charge them $1,000 to do this. We'd say, well, let's throw 5,000 at them. So like, if they'll say yes, then we'll do this, no questions. And that was kind of more our approach to that, was like, if they're going to pay us a lot of money and it's our hourly rate is effectively like $2,000 an hour because it's 2 hours of work and they pay us $5,000, then absolutely we'll do that.
Makes total sense. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah. We
think
were
then
just
inherently you're like, oh, if we can multiply this, why the hell not? Yeah.
exactly. And, we can touch on this later, but there's definitely a lot of lessons learned and like some giant mistakes that we did on the way, especially on the way out of the business that were very pertinent, kind of related to like finding new revenue streams and growing the business. I can kind of just dive into that if you guys want to hear more about that.
I think you read our mind.
Perfect. Yeah. And so, what was really, I think, unique about link texting was when I started it, I knew the business would die at some point because people don't use desktops and like they don't visit websites on their laptops anymore. Like, you don't need link texting as a product in 2025. People aren't going to, visit XYZ mobile app on they're on their mobile phone already, and they're going to be able to click and download it. And so we knew when we started this that there's actually like a lifespan to this business. The big mistake I made was, and in hindsight, I knew somebody else knew something that I didn't know here, was we knew we built this business. We had, I think, almost like 800 paying customers at our peak, like a lot of customers in the same space. But since we knew the business was dying, rather than try and build another business with our existing customers, we just did something completely different instead. And that was a horrible idea in hindsight, but I didn't know any better when I was 25, 26, and I wish I did. And so we kind of took, we're making 20 grand a month, and my co-founder and I decided to start a different business that we were passionate about, but didn't really know enough about. And we had the money to kind of front us and go into that. And we were able to raise VC funding for that new idea. And so kind of kept going. I still was this guy who came to Silicon Valley to be a VC funded founder and stuff like that, but took a nice bootstrap process on the way. But in hindsight, I wish I just would have built a different business with my existing link texting customers, or at least like given a much harder try at that, rather than just knowing that this business was eventually going to die and kind of let it die. We actually ended up selling it. I wish I would have, said like, hey, it is a godsend to have 800 customers in the same vein. And so I wish I would have gone at trying to build like, what is that next like kind of consolidated solution that he could have done, maybe something more around marketing or something like that. But I didn't know what I had. And so that's a really good lesson in the back. Like, your first business in doesn't have to be your final business. Like you can just keep evolving your product. You see this in VC sometimes. Like you'll see a company raise its 50 million Series B and still pivot because they've kind of hit what I call a local maximum for the area that they're in. And so we definitely hit a local maximum with link texting, but I kind of took the wrong next step in my opinion in hindsight. Yeah.
So, what was your exit strategy then? And also, if you were, let's say, building this business today, would you take a different approach?
Definitely no exit strategy when we started the business. And when I actually sold it, I literally just posted on my Facebook at the time. I was like, hey, does anybody want to buy a SaaS business? And I totally met the person who bought my business because of that. It wasn't like the person wasn't my friend, but somebody was like, oh, I know somebody that buys SaaS businesses. Let me connect you with them. And that is how I sold my business. So building a network can pay dividends in ways you'll never expect.
Yeah. I don't think anything's more true today where, influencer-led growth is such a big thing. So maybe you're onto something with influencer-led exiting too. Maybe you're just ahead of your time.
Yeah.
He's trademarking that one right now.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I guess looking back too, because I think you give us really great insights on, what worked, what didn't work, like what would you do differently, how you went about some of these things throughout the course of that, the entire journey, and maybe even each journey collectively. How are you getting, advice, influence, insights? Was it directly through some, third-party resource? Was it through people you met along the way? I know you mentioned, obviously you've both bootstrapped and gotten, VC funding and in different, situations. You're going to get more direct or indirect influence. I'm curious to, hear like, how you learned and grew, as a founder, multi-time founder, and what maybe you'd recommend for others who are starting and how important it is to go out and seek that influence so quickly.
Yeah, while I'll say advice is it can certainly be helpful, and we had a little bit along the way. Honestly, the biggest one was just like having a customer to talk to, like learning from your customers was like 99% of it. Like just building something, taking, my co-founder had an insight and we tested insight with what I call the MVP. And then it was just talk to customers every single chance we get. Doesn't matter if they were going to pay us or not. Like just take a chance to talk to them, hear their problems, hear why they're using you. And it kind of allowed us, we even were able to flip that into making more money for our business, by listening to our customers, by like, uh, the customer discussions guided our business model where it's like, hey, maybe for certain customers, we completely nix the monthly fee if they commit to a certain minimum number of text messages sent per month. And so they pre-buy a certain package per month and stuff like that. And, or maybe some people are like, we'll just pay the SaaS fee because we want to have high support in case anything goes wrong. We're a larger company. And so it was just really listening to like, what's the explicit customers need and tailoring your solution as best as you can to fit theirs. And then kind of sneaking in a price increase in the middle as much as possible.
Yeah. I think that resonates from two PMs here. Being able to talk to your customer and delighting your customer is by and large like the best thing you can possibly do to see success, right? And I think you kind of you're much more of maybe one end of the spectrum of a technical engineer who's, comfortable based on, how, your early experience of selling things. But I would love to hear kind of like your pitch for, other technical founders who might be listening to this. Maybe not so much the selling aspect. There's an argument that everyone on this and all the entire founding team should be selling, but more importantly, having the ability to talk to users versus having someone else, having that direct line of communication. Because I would argue, having worked with so many of you guys, it's like engineers are the best problem solvers. So like, why not have them talk directly to the source versus having this third party representative, so to speak?
Absolutely. This is one thing I'm big on is even if you're definitely, I mean, talk to your engineer first, but even if they're like not willing to talk to the customer directly, it's not their thing, at least have them be like a fly on the wall in all the conversations that you have. Be like, hey, you don't have to talk anything, but I'd just love for you to listen in and like hear if anything piques your mind and we can kind of have a little debrief afterwards. But it's definitely like talk to the person. And this is kind of where I think empathy and EQ come into hand. Like what is their comfort level and what's going to work best for them, making sure who you're working with and coming together in an agreement of like, hey, this works for both of us, you're comfortable with what we're doing and we're all going to learn here. And I think that's really key. That being said, if you can find engineers willing to talk to people, like grab and hold on to that person, be like, you're with me, let's do this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So wrapping up our conversation today, Brian, what is next for you as a builder?
Yeah, I'm currently a PM at different startups, and I'm kind of staying in the PM of startups lane. Although I'm looking to maybe go in my next adventure sometime soon. I know I want to be a founder again at some point. I don't know when that'll be, and probably one of the biggest things I've learned. I'd say it's probably will be quite a while till I be a founder again. I want to be very clear on the problem space existing before I dive in. That's what I like. That's what really went wrong with my first two startups before link texting was I wasn't super clear on the problem space, or I thought I knew it, but I didn't really know it, or the problem space being large, but me not knowing enough about that space, where when I come up with a solution, it's just like bad solutions. Like they don't actually solve the problem or they don't fit the way the industry works. And so just making sure I actually understand the opportunity there. What I will say, and this is one thing that's like a pro for a younger founder, is when you have that kind of, I'll call it hubris to just tackle something you don't know about, I don't want to be this bad way, but you get lucky sometimes. And lucky is where a lot of the really big things come from. But lucky is not, again, you can't exactly make luck. You can do your best to make your own luck, but luck is a huge part of things when you're kind of tackling something. And you might hit the right thing right away, you might not. But more knowledge has never hurt me. Yeah. I can kind of talk like, I mean, on a more personal sense, some interesting learnings I've had in the last few years. After spending so much time being a founder and builder and like working like 80 hours a week, and especially when my like last startup closed and I went back to working again, sometimes you realize, something else can be your passion. And I kind of like, in the last 5 years, I've picked up being an electronic music DJ outside of work. And so like,
Oh man, so many questions there. We can have a whole nother conversation all around that. My goodness.
yeah, and just yeah. So like when I went from working hours a week at a startup to 40 hours a week at a job, I was like, why I have so much free time? What do I do with all this free time? Like, I'm not the
It's
type to
like the
just sit
curse of the
around.
athlete who stops playing professional sports and then it's like, oh, what do I do with all this time?
It's totally like I played enough video games in the first 3 weeks, and I
That's
was like,
right.
all right, I need to do something else. I love telling the story about how I started into DJing. I like have always been like a music passionate person and everything, and every time I'd hang out with friends at the park, I always was the one that brought a Bluetooth speaker to like play music. And I don't remember who told me this, but this was like conveniently 2 months after my startup closed. I was hanging out at Dolores Park with some friends playing music, and somebody asked me, "Hey, what playlist is this?" I was like, "Oh, it's not a playlist. I'm just picking some of my favorite songs." And that person goes, "Oh, that's really cool. Are you a DJ?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And I went and bought a turntable the next day.
That's
This is
amazing.
like full circle with like you building the entire product
Yeah,
over the course of the weekend. This is what I'm seeing. It's the same
it's
thing.
totally like that's a fit. We're not gonna wait. We're just gonna go. And if it doesn't work once you've gone, you gave it a try, but you're actually gonna go right now and try this thing. Yeah.
Would that be your biggest piece of advice for someone starting? It's just if it feel like I know we've talked about I'm a big advocate of knowing the problem space that you want to being passionate or having some direct correlation, but obviously there's some point at which you have to jump off the cliff and build a plane on the way down. So like is kind of that the biggest piece of advice do you think? I've at least heard that a couple of times resonate as a theme from you. But when it comes to starting something, not knowing when or where or how to start, like obviously you just have to get started. So I'm curious about
Yeah,
that.
just get started as soon as possible. The longer you wait, the worse it's. And one of the things I love to say, like this is the one for the non-technical founders. Something I did early on was fake it till you make it. I would build a demo and then take a YouTube recording of it. And this app didn't work, didn't exist, but I would show this demo to people and be like, "Hey," I actually learned this tip from my co-founder of Link Texting was at the end of the demo, I would ask them to pay for it. I wouldn't say, "Would you pay for this?" I would be like, "This product is real and is like launching Monday. Will you give me $50 a month for this right now?" And you're going to
The
get a
true
real
MVP.
yes or no response from them on that.
Yeah.
Actually. Like, don't say, "Would you pay for this?" Because people say, "Oh, yeah, I would." It's like, "Okay, can I see your credit card right now?" Well,
Yeah.
maybe not. It's like, okay, now you're getting to the real nitty gritty there. And so the sooner you can get to that, doesn't matter if you're building something, showing a demo, anything, it's like, pay for this now is like the
Yeah.
biggest indicator.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you then I guess agree in that same notion of selling your co-founder if you're non-technical, right? Because there's this aspect of selling almost stage one is finding your technical founder. So you have to sell them and sometimes putting in that sweat equity to build something out to some specific point at which you can get it to then show them that particular thing. So I guess not, I guess that wasn't a question, but my now question is, as a technical person, like what would be that thing for those folks who are listening that are non-technical but want to desperately find that person who's technical? Like, how would you do that, and what would be the best way to get them to get buy-in?
Like in my opinion, the number one is if you have like two customers, which is one customer, it's like they've already paid for this and they're just waiting for it to be ready for them. Boom, that's like far and away the best in my opinion you can get to. It's like, no, the payment's already there, the customer's already there, the contract signed on the dotted line, we have 3 months to over to the sem, I'm racing to find my technical person to get this done. That's going to be, like, in my opinion, the strongest and most compelling pitch, is that you've actually done the work. Because so many business founders, I think this is less so nowadays, but more historically, they're like, I have this great idea. It's like the ideas are a dime a dozen. But if you have, I have this great idea and I have two pre-signed paying customers. Oh, the road, like, we're going. He already went. He's going. I gotta join too and get going too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I want to get Brian to give a shout out because I personally want to listen, and I hope everyone who ends up watching this ends up wanting to listen. And we'll definitely drop it in the show notes in the description. What is your? Do you have a SoundCloud? Do you have a Spotify? Like, what? Give us
Yeah.
the pitch and market yourself a little bit here. I know we're not able to text message people through this conversation, but we can do our best to get you'll at least get a couple viewers here. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my DJ producer alias is Adore, spelled ADXRE, because I'm an artist and I like things to be weird. But I'm on Instagram, Spotify, SoundCloud, everything under that same name. I produce high energy house and techno music, and have even in the last year or two gotten to open for numerous international touring acts when they came through San Francisco. And so it's been like a really, really awesome experience, creative endeavor, exposure for myself, and looking forward to see where everything goes from here.
love that. Again, I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation about that and the behind the scenes, but another day, and hopefully
For next
we'll be
time.
able to steal some more of your time in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Brian.
And also for anyone who is curious about Brian's music and Brian does on the side, on the creative side, I've had the immense privilege of seeing Adore live in person, and it is definitely a worthwhile experience. Please go check out his music. I'm sure you're going to be mind blown just like me.